Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. I hope you're having a wicked Sunday. Man United Chelsea this afternoon, live on Sky Sports. Buzzing for that. Get your predictions in the comments right now. Patrick Van Stra and Christopher Hamill are joining me to answer all of your questions that you've been sending in all week. We're kicking straight off with Stian Saugen, who says, who do you guys think is the most underrated manager in the Premier League? Pato, who are you going to say?
I'm going to go for Claude Puel.
Claude Puel, Southampton boss.
I think he's great. I think Southampton are really good at hiring coaches. You know, like over the last few seasons, after Adkins went, they got in Pochettino, then they brought in Koeman, now they've got Puel, and basically every season, despite the fact they sell stars, they're still really good.
Mane's gone, Pella's gone, Wanyama.
Claude Puel was a title winner with Monaco back in the day. I mean, he was a player there, he was a one-club man, and then became manager there, won the league with them, this in the late 90s. And I think he's worked wonders with them this season. They were on a real cold streak of finishing. No one could put the ball in the back of the net, but they were dominant in a bunch of games, and they got to the EFL Cup final. I thought they deserved
Probably should have beaten us.
They were really good. And if you look as well at their outgoings, you know, they lost Wanyama, like they've lost important players, and he's brought in Gabbiadini, he's made Romain look fantastic. I looked at the average age of the outgoing players this summer, and it was 27. And the average age of the incoming players was 24. So he's rejuvenating the squad. He's made a profit for the club. And I think, you know, they're going to be competitive again. If it weren't for the fact that top six this season is basically impregnable, then they could fly up the league. I think he's really, really good. Yeah,
I agree. I think it is hard to be underrated in the Premier League, though, isn't it, Hamster? There's only so many people that don't know how good you are. Because it's everywhere. It's around the world.
Well, it's one of those leagues where it's a league of extremes, isn't it? You're either given all the kudos, all the praise in the world, or after a 3-4 game bad spell, you know, the pressure on your back, haranguing you, and it looks like end of days. I think Puel's a great shout. Southampton are going through a real purple patch at the moment that remind me of Swansea when they went through the likes of Rodgers, when they went through Paulo Sousa, Martinez, when they had that little spell where they were hiring really well and bringing in the right sort of players. I mean, in terms of underrated, this season it's hard to look past the one and only Tony Pulis. Headbutts players naked in the shower. West Brom currently 8th. Last time I checked, they'd scored 14 set pieces.
The set piece
Now, on Continental Club, we were talking to Ted Newton, Pat and I, who's a transfer analyst. He also does stuff with set pieces, and he was saying a set piece in the Premier League is worth, not a set piece, sorry, a goal in the Premier League is now worth £2 million.
That's ridiculous.
So he's got extra £28 million worth of value just from having Gareth McCauley at that back post, because he's a savage in the area.
He is.
He's brutal.
He is. Actually, is he still top scorer? He was at one stage, like a couple of weeks ago, joint top scorer with Rondon.
But it's true, like, Pulis is like, I know he hates the guy, but he's kind of the Wenger of mid-table. He's so consistent. Like, look at his finishes over the last few years. It's like 13th, 12th, 11th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 11th. Like, he's so consistent. He will keep you up. He'll create a decent defence, no matter who you give him. You give him a bunch of, like, 35-year-old centre-backs, and Tony Pulis just rubs his hands and says, no one's going to get through this. It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. There's a few other shouts. A lot of people will probably say Eddie Howe. Obviously, he's done quite a good job with them getting in the Premier League now. Looks like they're going to be safe yet again. I'm not sure he is underrated, though. I potentially think he's a little bit overrated.
Again, he's someone who, if Bournemouth put a 3-game streak together, potential Arsenal candidate. You know, if they lose 3 or 4 in a row, it's, oh, look how leaky that defence is. Can he manage a top club because he can't put a tight defence together?
I actually think there's an argument to be made that Mauricio Pochettino is still a little bit underrated. If you combined last season points and this season points, since the start of last season, I think Tottenham Hotspur are about 11 points clear on about 138 points. I think Man City are second on 127. That's how consistently impressive they've been. They've had a couple of bad patches, which cost them a real title push last season and probably has this season as well. But
he's managed without Kane in various parts of the season as well, hasn't he? The start, the last month, Son stepped in. He's used the squad really well.
He's had the result
still third.
Exactly, and you look at some of the miracles he's working with Dele Alli. Dele Alli looks like a world beater under Pochettino. He's a very talented player, but Pochettino has really found a position and a role for him in that Tottenham team, linking brilliantly with Harry Kane.
And it wasn't as if their recruitment was great. They spent 30 million on Sissoko,
and they've
just got away with it.
It's dreadful, in fact. Like
top-notch
Spurs
banter.
are going to finish above Arsenal for the first time in more than 20 years this season, and they've done it while spending 30 million on Musa Sissoko.
Yeah.
That shows you how good the coach is, because the transfers are not good.
Mate.
The transfers are not good at all. But I think you're right. He's always going to get criticised a little bit, kind of for the same reason we see with like Thomas Tuchel, where people will say, "What's he won? What's he won?" And that's the only sort of achievement in the game. And actually, what Pochettino's done is he hasn't won anything yet with Spurs, but he certainly could, and he's put them in a position just to kick on and establish themselves in the top four. Isn't that ultimately the greatest success?
The culture of the club.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you need pedigree to win leagues. People don't realise. Obviously, Spurs of yesteryear may have choked by now, but he comes out in his post-match and he's like, "I don't know what Spurs were like before I got here, but this is how Spurs are going to be now," and everyone believes him.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. But who do you think is the most underrated manager in the Premier League? Let us know in the comments below. Next question is another Twitter question. This one is from Ab Pro. He says, which player has wasted the most talent? Now, there are some big names that I can think of. I'm actually going to say Ravel Morrison, early doors. I think it has to be a shout. Obviously, you've probably heard Rio Ferdinand talking on the subject and saying that this was a player the likes of Paul Pogba used to look up to, Jesse Lingard used to look up to, was an absolutely supreme talent. Used to train with the first team at 16 and make a mockery of some really senior players in that dressing room. And his attitude stunk. Awful attitudes. In trouble with the police a lot. I think he got done for assault and battery. He got done for burglary. He got done for all sorts of nasty things. Sir Alex Ferguson, to his credit, stuck with him for a while. I think Fergie has talked about in the past how he tried to act as a father figure and it was just impossible. The kid was just a nightmare. He gave him 3 or 4 final chances. It never happened for him. And eventually he left, went to West Ham, where I think it was Big Sam Allardyce took him.
Yeah.
And everybody thought, you know what? If Fergie can't get the best out of him, maybe Big Sam can put a bit of discipline in his life. And it didn't happen there either. Didn't happen for him at West Ham. Again, attitude problems, in trouble with the police, off the pitch. And then he found his way out to Italy, didn't he, at Lazio, and couldn't get in the squad, couldn't get in the training squad, left to train with the reserves, and since then it's kind of dwindled away for him. It's a shame as well, because he was unbelievably talented. If you ever get the chance to watch some highlights of Ravel Morrison in his youth days at Manchester United's under-16s and under-18s on YouTube, it's ridiculous.
That's genuinely what Joe does with his downtime.
It's ridiculous. He could dribble past absolutely anyone.
But that's only half the game, isn't it?
It is. It's all about attitude. Some of the other players that we've got noted down here: Balotelli, Ben Arfa, Adriano, Gascoigne. As well.
I think I'd probably go for Adriano. I have a big affinity with Brazilian football, and after he absolutely romped through, I can't remember what year it was because I think back then they had it in successive years, but it was a Copa America.
Yeah.
And he just absolutely dominated. Obviously had 2 years at Inter Milan where he dominated too. They used to refer to him as the Emperor. He was very much in danger of becoming our generation's Ronaldo.
Yeah.
Because, R9, as much as I loved watching him, during the 2002 World Cup, I was, 10?
Yeah.
And that was when he was in his pomp.
Adriano was wicked.
6, that left foot, from kick-off, he'd win a corner, straight away, bosh. But yeah, it's such a shame what happened with him and it's happened to a lot of Brazilian players before him, but he had alcohol issues after his father's death, didn't he? And then he sort of had that season where he played pretty well at Fluminense, and he looked like he was flirting with the idea of coming back, and now he's playing. I mean, he was at... Was it Miami? Was it Nesta's and Maldini's team who were trying to recruit him?
He refused to play, and now I remember doing a story about him on BFF.
In Brazilian slums,
in running drugs for a gang or something.
Supposedly something like that.
Sensationalised, wasn't it? Yeah.
Madness.
You never know. I mean, the thing is, like, I'm kind of more on Chris's side than on yours, because I think the issue with Ravel Morrison is when we talk about what a talent he was, I'm mostly going on what other people have said.
Yeah.
Like, Rio Ferdinand says he was great. Like, Alex Ferguson says he was great. But, like, there have been plenty of players who could do it at youth level but haven't really done it at the top level. So I'd want to go for somebody who I feel has shown that top level talent and then not delivered on it.
Yeah.
And so far, a guy who's in danger of doing that is Mario Götze.
Ooh, it's an interesting shout.
Because he was up there with Eden Hazard as like one of the most highly fated youngsters in world football when he was at Dortmund. He was incredible in that Klopp system. Arsenal wanted him every season for about 3 or 4 years. He was linked with every big team under the sun. Went to Bayern, which at the time I just remember thinking like, you have no guarantee of starting. Like I don't quite get this move yet. And he didn't really start. Like he played wide, he played through the middle, he played like up top. Pep liked him because he's a great technical footballer or whatever, but Pep didn't play him all that often.
No.
His goal record there was good because he was still playing in a great team, but you're just like, but his talent just stagnated. Now he's back at Dortmund, he's got health issues, and I just think we're in real danger of never seeing the player that Mario Götze could have been.
Because when Pep bought him, he desperately wanted either Ribery or Götze to play as the false nine, and he could never get the best out of Götze in that role, in that slightly more progressive role. That's why he scored a lot of goals, but his impact was not as much because he had Toni Kroos in there. He got Thiago in, but Thiago had a lot of injuries. Schweinsteiger had a lot of injuries, so Götze ended up having to play quite deep in that team.
I feel like no, I agree, because you feel like some other players on the list that we've mentioned before, you've seen them at the top of their game, they're just not able to sustain it. Where with Götze, you felt like there was more to come. Like Balotelli at the Euros, I don't think he'll play better than that. He scored 15 goals this season in 24 appearances.
Even when he was 19, like in his first season at Inter Milan, like you look at his numbers now and you're like, this guy was tearing it up and he was a kid.
But yeah, Götze, you feel he could have been just world class.
Yeah, such a shame. Scratching off the neck. Our third question of the day comes from Lucas Weir. He says, who is the best English player of all time? Now, there's two ways to look at this, I think. One, who is the best player for England in an England shirt? And the second is, who is the best English player for their club? Personally, everybody's going to know who I'm going to say. I think Paul Scholes is the most technically gifted Englishman ever to put on an England shirt. Was completely ruined by Sven-Göran Eriksson, who played in left midfield. You're an absolute joker, Sven. But domestically, he was fabulous. There's also shouts for the likes of Wayne Rooney has to be up there. Top Man United goal scorer, top England goal scorer.
Yeah, anyone who doesn't think Wayne Rooney has had a first-class career is a moron.
Yeah, Alan Shearer as well. Alan Shearer, you got to throw his name in the hat.
260 Prem goals.
Yeah.
We actually, I mean, a lot of the time we do a little bit of prep for Sunday Vibes, but in this instance, we've actually done none. So I'm pretty stumped. I mean, I think Bex was a little underrated.
Should have won the Ballon d'Or in '98. Should have done.
Master technician, had a very good goal scoring record for Manchester United. Gascoigne, you know, these are all all mentions that you'd have heard before. There's not going to be anything.
Yeah, not going to be.
No left field shouts here. But I mean, what do you think, Van Straan? As a Dutchman who has no strong ties to the England national team.
I mean, Shearer, as I've said before, is probably the greatest goal scorer I've ever seen, or at least one of them.
He could just twat a ball. So emphatic.
But he was like an underrated technical player as well. Like you'd see him pull out wide and cross the ball in.
Like a mule.
He was a really fucking good all-round player.
Such a good header of the ball as well.
I mean, yeah, I agree with you that Scholes was probably the most technically gifted.
Definitely.
On the other hand, Scholes actually didn't have the consistency over his career that someone like Lampard had. Lampard was the same player his whole career, whereas Scholes started off as a very good attacking midfielder.
Yeah.
And it was only later on that he became an unbelievable deep-line playmaker.
Yeah.
But that's not his fault. And like you say, it's not his fault as well. It was played out of position for England. I also think that actually England have, it doesn't look it at the moment, but England actually have a history of phenomenal centre-backs. Like, I think Rio Ferdinand deserves a shout. He had everything, and of course Bobby Moore. Yeah, Tony Adams, Sol Campbell, I hate to say it, John Terry, and Ashley Cole. Ashley Cole was world-class for about 10 years.
Most capped fullback, Ashley Cole, yeah.
Yeah, a very long time. Like some of the names in there that we haven't mentioned, obviously Bobby Charlton, who was previously England's top scorer from midfield as well.
Sure.
There's a man who could hit a ball.
Player.
When the ball was weighed,
fucking double the amount we do now. The likes of Charlton and Moore probably should be in there, but we've obviously never watched them play live, and we've said before on this show that there's only so much you can judge from a YouTube compilation. So for us, I think we're all going to have differing aspects of why we're picking players, but who would you pick as England's greatest ever player? Is it going to be Scholes? Is it Shearer? Shouts for David Beckham? Let us know in the comments right now. Ethan Sydenham has the next question. Probably got your name wrong then. Who do you think is the best player never to win the Champions League? Now, Pato, I know you're very passionate about one player in particular here on this list, aren't you?
Yeah, Gigi Buffon.
Yes.
Gigi Buffon. This week we're filming on a Wednesday, and last night he kept another clean sheet as Juve beat Barcelona 3-0.
Yeah, great result.
And he's now been playing in the Champions League for 20 years. He's
20?
He's one of 30 players who have got more than 100 appearances in the competition.
Yeah.
He's got more than any other keeper except for Casillas. He has something like a 42% clean sheet rate, which means he keeps clean sheets in 42% of his games.
That's mad. In the Champions League as well, some of the players you're coming up against, the calibre of talent.
He's got to a final twice, and he hasn't won it. So he got to it in 2015, and he also got to it, I think, in 2003, when Juve played Milan. And he kept a clean sheet in that final. Yeah. Went to penalties. He saved 2 penalties in the shootout, and he still didn't win because Juve missed 3 penalties. And so Milan won 3-2.
He's actually in with a really good shot at winning it this year. I genuinely think so. I don't see Barcelona flipping that result around like they did against PSG.
Is there anyone in the world who wouldn't want to see Gianluigi Buffon win the Champions League?
Yeah, I agree with you. There's a couple of other names on this list. We've got the likes of Bergkamp, never won it, Thuram, R9, Ronaldo, who you were talking about earlier.
He's got to be the next out, surely, Brazilian Ronaldo.
Yeah, Brazilian Ronaldo, a very close second.
Cannavaro, World Cup winner, Ballon d'Or winner.
And there's also Zlatan Ibrahimovic as well. We haven't really mentioned him. He's not quite the calibre of the likes of Bergkamp and Ronaldo, Maradona in there as well, Cannavaro, but still, he's been at a lot of top clubs.
He's been there for a long time. He's been doing it at the top level. Like, you do feel a bit sorry for him, except for the fact he's got a bunch of league titles.
Yeah, I feel like with Maradona, he achieved something equally as impressive in wrestling the Scudetto away from Northern Italy with that Napoli side. It was incredible what he did at Napoli. But yeah, to have never have won it, shame.
Final question then, a bit more of a personal one. This is Butter1231 on Twitter. He says, to Chris Hamill actually, he sent this tweet. He said, how did you, Joe and Patrick meet and end up doing all of these shows? Love the chemistry and shit talking between you guys. Now, it's not as exciting as you're probably going to expect. A few years ago, obviously, Football Daily was a different beast. Adam Boltwood, Lawrence McKenna, Statman Dave, Football Daily Weekly. What a show. Those boys left. Adam went to TFR, which is very popular at the moment. Statman Dave was at Squawker at the time. Lawrence was doing a load of freelance stuff. He was now on the True Geordies podcast, of course. Patrick McKeamy then came in, took the reins. Yeah, less said about Patrick McKeamy, the better. And then we took over pretty much from then on in.
Well, you took over.
Yeah, I took over.
Joe did a lot with the channel, very early doors. Yeah.
And then Pato and Chris came on board. Pato was first through the door when we were just starting up Eurofootball Daily, wasn't it? About that sort of time.
Yeah, Eurofootball Daily had been going a couple of months. When I arrived, I think it had like 500 subscribers, maybe 600. Yeah. And now we're at what, 180k?
Yeah.
Thanks to you guys. Yeah, EFD kind of turned into a little bit, like Joe was there at the beginning, but it kind of turned into like our pet project, I think.
It's because Joe was the face of FD, and we were like, well, we want a bit of that pie, don't we, mate? So we were like, let's just take the reins of FD.
We want to work with Joe for as short a time as possible.
And make stellar programming like Stat Wars.
What were you boys doing before? Pato, what were you doing before you got to Football Daily?
I worked in the film industry. I was a script reader in movie development. So what happens is you get sent scripts, and I'd read them, like decide how good they were.
A well-learned man.
Talk about whether they should be made or not. Give comments on budget and give my recommendations to producers, basically.
Very nice. What about you, Hams? Were you as glamorous as Van Schaar?
You boys know this story, but I'll tell it again. I worked in advertising for a couple of years as a copywriter, writing for such exciting clients as Netto, a budget supermarket based up north. I actually did some work for Harley Davidson, which was pretty cool. So, you know, shut your mouth. But and then I just got a little bit disillusioned with it all, and I spent all my savings, much to my girlfriend's delight, not on a deposit for a house, but on 3 months in New York, going to the New York Film School, where I learned to use all this equipment that, you know, my boy Adam Temps is standing in for me at current behind the camera. But if I didn't do it, you know, we struggle. That's why when Zach films, things look like shit. But and then I came back and fastly realised I'd vastly overspent in New York, and I started frantically applying for jobs. And these guys got back to me within a week, 2 weeks, I think, because I could do, you know, self-shooter. And I actually remember in my interview, Pato put together a quiz where it was like, name 10 footballers, and I got 10 out of 10. But then I changed Ian Rush to John Aldridge. And I got 9 out of 10, and I'm still livid about it to this day.
I can't believe you got the job based on that.
You're lucky to get the job on that. So that's all we've got time for on today's Sunday Vibes. But before you do anything else, go over to Sky Sports This afternoon, they've got West Brom Liverpool straight after this, 1:30 kickoff. Then the big one, Chelsea versus Manchester United. Boys, predictions, Chris Hamill.
League winners versus Europa League contenders. I'm going to go 2-0 Chelsea.
2-1 Chelsea.
I'm going to go for 1-1. It's at Old Trafford. That's the base result every single week. But what do you think is the score going to be? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks very much for all your questions. Make sure you get them in for next week. Thanks for these boys for joining me. And we'll catch you later. Bye. Sayonara.